Now, this unit is important because, as you guys know, that when it comes to political science syllabus for A-level students, you basically have two areas: global political science and local political science. So, what you study under global political science are the concepts, those constitutions, democracy, and all that, right? And under local political science, you have to study about the Sri Lankan political history, right? So it starts here. So you need to get this sorted. You need to get this unit sorted. So we can move on to unit 8, where we study about Salisbury and 72 Constitution. And following that, we have to study about the 78 Constitution. And so we have a few more lessons about the foreign policy of Sri Lanka and the political party system of Sri Lanka. For all those units, you need to get this unit sorted. This is the foundation for all of that, right? So that's why I decided to take this time and have this online class, so that all my students will have a clear understanding of this lesson, right? So I understand some of you all have notes, some of you all don't. That's fine. Just engage with me in this class and just be clear, because this part in political science is actually a story. This is like a story. You just need to know the story and the summary of the story. Then you're sorted. So basically, this lesson is a storytelling for the teacher. Okay, right. So let's start. You guys can take down notes when it comes to important facts, right? Okay. So when you say colonial era, what does it mean? First of all, colonial era means when a country is conquered by an alien nation, right? No country in the world is a stranger to that. Every country has been conquered by some other alien nation at one point. So even when it comes to Sri Lanka, we have been facing invasions, especially from India, South India. We had invasions from Kerala, and then this Pandya country, and then Tamil Nadu. All these kingdoms used to invade us, right? So by 1500s, specifically in 1505, something important happened, which was the arrival of the Portuguese in Sri Lanka in 1505, right? Which was followed by the Dutch, and which was followed by the British in 1796, right? But when it comes to Portuguese, Dutch, and English, the English conquerors are unique. Why is that? Yes, because they managed to capture the entire country of Sri Lanka. So in 1796, they captured the lower country, the coastal areas of Sri Lanka by the Dutch. From the Dutch. Then in 1815, they managed to capture upcountry, because the upcountry people were unhappy with the Sinhalese king we had. It wasn't exactly Sinhalese king, but like the Sri Lankan king we had. And the people actually supported the British rulers to overthrow him and bring the British rule in 1815. Right. So 1815 marked the year that Sri Lanka was fully captured by an alien nation, the Brits. So after capturing us in 1815, now just use your common sense and tell me, just use your common sense and tell me, if you are ever to capture a country, what would be the first thing you do? What should be the first thing you do in your newly captured country? Use your common sense and think.
So you have already captured the country?
Yeah, you have captured the country. Now imagine Sri Lanka goes to Maldives and we invade and we capture Maldives. What's the first thing you do? What's the first thing that you should watch out for in the first few years?
Watch out for the people fighting against you.
Yes, you have to make sure that those people don't retaliate, right? Because people aren't used to being conquered by another country. So obviously, the first few years, people are going to fight back, and that's the exact thing happened in Sri Lanka. As you guys know, in 1818, those Kapetipola and his people, they fought against the British, right? So first few years, you need to keep those retaliations down, and just establish your power. After like 7, 8, 10 years, people get used to being conquered, and they are just okay with that. Then you can proceed. So by 1820s, by late 1820s, British rulers realized that Sri Lankans are now okay. They are used to being conquered by the British, and people are okay. No one's retaliating. So now it's a perfect time. Now it's a perfect time to change Sri Lanka, right? Introduce constitutional reforms to Sri Lanka, and that's what they did. And in 1833, they introduced what reforms? Anyone? What were the reforms? Colebrook, yeah. They introduced Colebrook in 1833, right? So 1833 Colebrook reforms are extremely important in Sri Lanka. Why? That's because the Sri Lanka you know today, the country you were born in and the country you've known for your entire life, is a result of Colebrook reforms. The country was something completely different before 1833. 1833 marked that turning point that changed our country forever, right? If you are to time travel before 1833, you'd see something completely different. Now, whenever you get invaded by a country, your country changes a little bit, right? Example. Now, I'm sure some of you all are in this class are Buddhists, right? And as you guys know, Buddhism is somewhat associated with these horoscopes and all these, this Devala and those are that fruit basket, fruit plate, pujaval and all that, right? But the authentic Buddhism, the original Buddhism, does not feature any of those. In fact, the horoscopes and those zodiac symbols and all these Devala and this puja and all those things are features of Hinduism, right? Buddhist people never believed in horoscopes or nakat for that matter, which makes you confused. But nowadays, Buddhists are the people who are associated with those. That's because these things blend. These things blended with Buddhism as a result of South Indian invasions. Now, when Anuradhapura...
So the reason why they combine Hinduism and Buddhism is because people didn't want to follow Buddhism?
No.
They didn't
want
not like to follow.
Not exactly. It's like this. Now, when there are several cultural elements in a diverse society, those things get mixed, right? Now, for an example, the student who is currently missing in the class, Yannick, his mother is a Buddhist and the father is a Catholic, right? So when you visit him, you can see religious items from both religions are there, right? So when you live in a diverse society, things blend like that. Understand? So back in ancient Anuradhapura times, when there was Buddhism and when there was Hinduism, which came with like South Indian invasions, those two religions sort of got blended in practicality, right? Now, there were some Buddhists who got to know that there's this thing called horoscopes and stuff, and they sort of tried it out. Then it became a Buddhist thing. You understand, right? Since then, the horoscopes became a part of Buddhism. Nowadays, like even these Buddhist monks and all, like you go to a Buddhist monk to get your horoscope done. But ideally, it's not an authentic Buddhist concept, right? Now, Anuradhapura kingdom ended with a South Indian invasion, which lasted for like 50 years. Their rule lasted over 50 years. So when Hindus conquered Sri Lanka for 50 years, certain Hindu features got mixed with the Sri Lankan culture. Now, example, all of you all know the Sandakadapahana, right? There's those half circle thing that you find at the bottom of the step.
When LR came, sir,
Yeah.
so when LR came, he removed the cow, right?
Exactly. That's what I was gonna say. Like because it has like one pattern of animals. You have a cow and like three other animals. But when Elara came, who was a South Indian Tamil king, since Tamils consider the cow to be a sacred animal, the Elara removed the cow from that Sandakadapana because that's something you step on, right? And which continued after that. So now you can see how cultural things get mixed in a diverse society. And also, another important thing is, another interesting fact is that, in Buddhism that some people study about going to heaven, that there are 6 heavens and 4 hells and all that. None of those things came in authentic Buddhism. Buddhism doesn't have a concept of heaven or hell for that matter. Buddhism tells you that, when whatever the good or bad you do, it gets carried out to your next life. Simple as that. But when Catholicism and Christianity came to Sri Lanka, which presented a concept of heaven and hell, you do good, you go to heaven, you do bad, you go to hell, that sounded more attractive. So because of that, Buddhism had to keep up. Then they incorporated another concept saying, okay, you know what, we also have 6 heavens, we also have 4 hells and all that, right? And also what we are celebrating today, Vesak. Now, make no mistake, Vesak has been celebrated by Buddhists for 2,500 years. That's there. But all these things we do that we are not allowed to do this year, making lanterns and stuff. Making lanterns, you make lanterns, right? There are those Toran, and you say Bhakti Gita. There are singing, like the groups coming and singing those Vesak songs and all, Buddhist songs and all, right? None of those things existed before 300, 400 years ago. These things came as a result of the Catholicism and Christianity in Sri Lanka. Because the Catholics and Christians in Sri Lanka, when they celebrated Christmas, they had Christmas decorations and they had carols, right? So they realized that, Catholicism and Christianity has a part of entertainment in their religion, which Buddhism did not have. So Buddhism also incorporated, lanterns and those Vesak decorations and Bhakti Gita, which was like carols, right? So as you can see, what we have today, what we know as culture today, is not what it originally existed back then. Because of these diversity, things have been sort of like mixed and blended, and what we have is like a result of that, right? So every time Sri Lanka has been invaded, something has been changed in Sri Lanka, which was a common thing. But most importantly, until 1833, all the invasions we had from other nations didn't change much. If you put them into scale, I would say previous invasions of South Indians and Portuguese and Dutch, those people changed about 7%, 8% of the Sri Lankan culture. Whereas Colebrook reforms changed nearly 90% of the Sri Lankan culture. It was that heavy. Okay. I will tell you an interesting fact which I will explain later. Just keep this in mind. I am certain that you guys are aware that in the Sri Lankan culture, pretty much in the South Asian culture, I would say that, you know, when it comes to brown people, there's a concept called posh and gode. There are certain things that are known to be posh things. There are certain things known to be like, you know, gode things. That's like a division we have in the society. And surprisingly, that has something to do with political science. Because what this division we have in the society nowadays was a result of 1833 Colebrook Reforms. And for some of you all in the class, I think I might have already taught this. Some of you all are new to this. Right? But this division we have in the society is a result of 1833 Colebrook Reforms. And when we move on in the lesson, you will understand how that happened. Okay, right. So, as I told you, now British people have sort of established their rule in Sri Lanka. And they want to change Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka, which was an aristocratic feudalist system where we have a caste system, and you know that picture you get when you say ancient times, the monarchical times in Sri Lanka, that the British people want to change it. Because in Great Britain, by this time, they had adopted liberalism, capitalism, and they had started moving on. And they wanted their colonies to follow up, right? So in 1833, when the Colebrook Commission came to change Sri Lanka, there were like 5 people in that commission. The most important 2 people were William Colebrook.
Hello, sir.
Hi, Keith. Can you keep the mic mute? Others are here on Zoom, okay? So you also listen and take down notes, huh? Right. So there was William Colebrook, and there was C.H. Cameron. C.H. Cameron was in charge of judicial changes in Sri Lanka. William Colebrook was in charge of political and economic changes of Sri Lanka. And by the way, I have actually seen the original report, the original book they wrote in 1833, which is there in the archives. If you all have seen that, like interesting looking, different looking building right next to Racecourse, which is the National Archives, where you can find all these old documents. So I have seen with my own eyes the 1815 agreement Sri Lankans signed with the British to hand over Sri Lanka to them, as well as the 1833 Colebrook Cameron report. So the first thing this commission changed was, write this down, number 1, restricting the unreasonable powers of the governor. Restricting the unreasonable powers of the governor. That was the first thing 1833 Colebrook Cameron Reforms did. So what do you mean by this? What it means is, now Sri Lanka had a monarchy until 1815, right? So when British people captured Sri Lanka, what they simply did was replacing the king with one of their British dudes, right? So they basically got there one of British military dudes, calling the governor. You're like, you know what, you are in charge of Sri Lanka now. So he was equally powerful as the king. He has the power to arrest anyone whenever he wanted without a warrant. He could just, you know, put anyone in prison or just, expel from Sri Lanka without even a trial. Or he had the power to come and sit in the criminal court and act as a judge. So again, pretty much a judge. So then the Colebrook Commission came and said, you know what, this is ridiculous. I mean, like, Sri Lanka had a king, and as the agents of democracy, the British people have come here and they've replaced the king with a pretty much another king, the governor. So what's the point? So they decided to remove all those unnecessary powers. Okay, make no mistake, the governor was still superbly powerful during the British monarchical era. What they removed was unnecessary powers, which were like the ability to arrest anyone without a warrant, the ability of expelling anyone from the country or putting in prison without a trial. and his power to get involved in the judiciary as a judge, right? Those powers were removed. That's the first thing. Then number 2 and number 3 are the most important ones: establishing a legislative council and an executive council, right? So I'm sure that you guys have studied this for O-level history in Colebrook Reforms that they established. They established a legislative council which had 15 members. Okay, I'm certain that you guys remember 15 members. It gets divided 9 officials, 6 unofficials, right? 3 out of the 6 unofficials, 3 unofficial, and 3 local and 3 Europeans, right? Okay. So what was the point in establishing a legislative council? Now, as political science students, you guys know legislature of a country has a duty. Why do we have a legislature? Why do we have a parliament in a country? To approve the decisions of the government, right? Government can't do whatever they want. Whatever the decisions they make, they have to be approved by the legislature. They are like the authority that approves the decisions, right? So that's why the Legislative Council was established. This council had 15 members, right? 9 officials, 6 unofficials. Out of the 6 unofficials, 3 of them were European planters. 1 of them was, and other 3 were locals. Out of the 3 locals, 1 of them was Sinhalese, 1 Tamil, and 1 Burgher. Okay. Right. Another important fact is the governor himself chaired this house, and it was the governor. Keith, can you mute your mic? Thank you. Governor chaired this house, and governor was the one who appointed the unofficials in the first place, right? So this legislative council was actually quite powerless for several reasons. Number 1 is, the first reason is that the governor chaired the legislature. Now you appoint a house saying that this house is there to approve governor's decisions, and you put governor as the chairperson of that council. So that's the first problem. Second problem was it had 9 British officials out of the 59, which is an overwhelming majority of British officials who are going to agree with the governor anyway. And then out of the 6 unofficials, all of them were appointed by the governor himself. So when you get appointed by someone, that person can remove you as well, right? So, you know, you wouldn't just challenge his decisions. So this legislature did not pose any control over the power of the governor. So we consider this legislature to be quite powerless, right? However, we consider that to be important. Why? Because this was the first legislature in Sri Lanka, and what we started with 15 has currently become, can any of you all tell me how many seats we have in the parliament at the moment?
225?
Yeah, we have 225 members in the parliament at the moment, right? So what we have as 225 started as 15 in 1833, 183 years ago, 187 years ago. Wait, how many? Yeah.
Sir, this is Nilalat Nilanolat, sir.
Yeah. Nilalat කියලා කියන්නේ British, Nilanola කියන්නේ ලංකාවේ අය. කියන්නේ locals. Yeah. But there's a problem here. Now, out of the 6 unofficials, 3 of them were European planters. Now, when I was in my O-level class for history, I had a question: why on earth we have 3 European planters in the legislature of Ceylon? British officials, I understand. British people conquer us. And having a Sinhalese, Tamil, and a Burgher also, I understand. Those are the ethnic groups of Sri Lanka. Why do we have 3 European planters? Why is that? Any of you all know why is that? That's because in 1833 Colebrook Cameron Reforms, British people started plantation in Sri Lanka, right? That was one of the main reasons that they came to Sri Lanka and conquered us, because they can do plantation and they can cultivate tea and coffee and spices and all that, right? So, which means they started advertising. They started advertising Ceylon in Europe as a place that you can do cultivation. Now in Europe, there were like advertisements going saying, like, are you having a tough time in London? Is it difficult for you to live in London? Why not buy a land in Ceylon and become a planter? Not only in London, like pretty much everywhere in Europe. So people who did not have like a good life in Europe had the option of coming to Sri Lanka, moving to somewhere like Nuwara or Kandy somewhere, buy like a huge chunk of land and have a bungalow and become a healthy planter. Now imagine in Sri Lanka, you guys live in Colombo. Imagine if you all have a tough time living in Colombo because of expenses and all, that you all always have the option of moving to a much more rural area, outstation, because you'd be able to buy a big chunk of land and you'll have lesser expenses. Understand? You'll be able to have a better house and all that. And that was the option Europeans had back then. So several, like huge number of Europeans came to Sri Lanka like that. And they started living in Sri Lanka and they bought all these lands and they started cultivating spices and all that. And they became planters, which was one of the biggest things in Sri Lanka at that time. So these planters had issues regarding their plantation and all that, right? So they needed a space. They needed a platform to voice out their problems. That's why they were given an opportunity to sit in the. They were given the opportunity to sit in the legislature. 3 European planters are allowed to sit, so they have direct access to the governor and let him know that the problems they face, right? So another important feature about this legislative council is that they picked a Sinhalese, a Tamil, and a Burgher. You call this communal representation. What does that mean? You choose a representative from a certain community, right? Now in today's parliament, do we have a Sinhalese representative? Do we have Tamil representatives? No. We have regional representation, which means we have members of parliament who are in the parliament representing a district. Colombo district member of parliament, Matara district MP, Kandy district MP, Jaffna district MP. Get it? But in 1833 Colebrook Reforms, that wasn't the case. You went to the legislature to represent your community, right? Which did create some racism, right? Now imagine if you go to the parliament representing your community, your race, you have to be a little racist. Get it? If you are sent to the parliament representing the Sinhalese or the Tamils, you can't really talk about a nationalistic approach. You have to appear for your ethnicity because that's what you are representing, right? So when you have several members representing several ethnicities in the legislature, they sort of like collide with one another because they represent their ethnicity. So do you realize that with communal representation that creates some ethnic tension in the country, right? And British people did this intentionally, because they wanted to create, they wanted to ruin the harmony between ethnicity of the countries so that they can conquer us easily, right? Now imagine if I have to conquer y'all, my students. If y'all are united, is it easy for me to conquer or is it difficult for me to conquer? It's difficult. So if I want to conquer y'all, I would just, create tension between y'all. I would divide y'all. You call that divide and rule or divide and conquer. It's a popular theory, right? First of all, I would be like, I would come to the boys and I would talk to the boys and be like, you know what, these girls, they're just stupid girls. No, y'all are boys, y'all are superior, y'all should act superior. Then I go to the girls and be like, you know what, like it's 2020, so girls should not, just let guys just rule. Right? You guys should stand up for yourselves. Right? Then I go over to boys again and I'm like, look, I talk to Milinda. Milinda be like, Milinda, you are a Peterite, okay? Just stand up for Peterites. Now those Yannick and Prashit and Keith, they are Josephians, no? Just stand up for Peterites.
Sir, brotherhood
But that's what British people did, Harid.
So are there girls in this class?
Yes, Keith, there are girls in this class.
Okay, never mind.
You feel like you should have installed Zoom now?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we have 5 methoids in this class. 5 only 4 today. One of them is unavailable, and we have one LCite in this class. And we have 3 Josephians and 1 Peter. This is
best opportunity to ask it.
This is not. Okay. Personal issues aside, we'll talk about them later. By the way, this is not counting the. This is not counting the 2 Josephians who are joining from home. My brothers are also listening here. They are also Josephians. Okay. So anyhow, that's the point. So I create disharmony. Then I would go up to Devanga and be like, Devanga, you're a Buddhist, okay? So others are not Buddhists. So you should stand up for Buddhism. Right? You get what I'm saying? Then I go up to the other girls and be like, you all are Tamils. You all have a heritage and, you all have been suppressed in this country. You all should stand up. Just don't let these other Sinhalese students to suppress you. And now what happens? Now there's so much disunity among you all. And you all are not united. So it's easier for me to conquer you all. It's much easier. Right? That's exactly what British people did. Right? Now, if I create a council and I appoint people saying, I can appoint people saying just students, right? I can say 3 students. 3 students can sit in my council. Instead, I be like, okay, 1 Josephian can sit in my council, 1 Methoite can sit in my council, 1 Peterite can sit in my council. Now you guys are bound to represent your school. Get it? You guys are bound to represent your school, and you guys are. It's inevitable that you guys are going to collide when you all are working together, and that's what they did. So because British people can't bring all the Sinhalese and all the Tamils into one ground and put them into a battle, what they did was they took 2 representatives to the Legislative Council. This is what you call communal representation. They intentionally did this. And as I told you, the Colebrook Reforms still has an impact on this country. Up to date, we have trouble getting along with the diversity we have. Sinhalese have trouble getting along with the Tamils, with the Muslims, and then Buddhists have a problem with the Christians and the Hindus and the Islamic followers, right? And even the Canadians have a problem with like Colombo people. These people have a problem with Southerners. These divisions were created and aggravated by the British. And it started in 1833 Colebrook Reforms. Okay. Just keep in mind, put a small note, in 1931 Donomo Reforms, they took steps to remove communal representation. Because the Donomo Commission, they sort of criticized the Colebrook Commission for doing this and setting this curse on Sri Lanka like nearly 100 years ago. And I'm quoting what they said. They said, communal representation is a cancer on the political body of Sri Lanka. But unfortunately, by that time, cancer had spreaded too much, and the ethnicities were, broken into pieces, which was like beyond repair, and we experienced a civil war as a result of that. Okay, now that's the most important part about Colebrook Cameron Reforms, the Legislative Council. It's important because that's the first legislature in Sri Lanka. It's important because the locals got the representation in it, right? The local people got the chance to sit in it in 1833, which is a big deal. Because in African countries and all, the locals didn't get to sit in the councils until like 1920s, 30s, until like 100 years later. In 1833, locals were allowed to sit with the British in the same council, which was a big deal. And thirdly, it's important because it introduced communal representation, which had a huge impact in Sri Lanka. And another interesting fact is that the locals sort of hesitated to sit in this council because locals did not know what is a legislative council. I mean, like, they had never seen a parliament. They always lived in monarchies, right? Come. Are you bored? Right? They had always sat in monarchies. So they didn't know what a legislature was. I mean, like, all of a sudden, British people will be like, okay, we have a legislative council and we need a Sinhalese, a Tamil, and a Burgher to sit here. And these people weren't educated about, democratic concept. They didn't know what actually a legislature was. What if this is like a council where they decide which people to execute and all, right? So then they would be like a part of a decision-making panel that executes locals. So they were sort of like, they feared to sit in this council. So much so that finally the Sinhalese person who sat in the legislative council, what was his name? I told you that day, right? His name was Panditaratna Bandaranayake. Okay. And the surname has to ring a bell for you all. That was the great-grandfather of SWRD Bandaranayake. Right? So the first Sinhalese who sat in the Legislative Council of Sri Lanka was Mr. Panditaratna Bandaranayake, who was the Sinhala English interpreter of the governor. He was the personal interpreter of the governor, Sinhalese English interpreter. So after he retired, his son sat in the Legislative Council. After that, his son sat. And like that, the Bandaranayake family tree has always had a member in the legislature of Sri Lanka from 1833 to 2015. There has always been a Bandaranayake in the Parliament of Sri Lanka until 2015, since 1833, which is sort of a record, right? In 2015, the last Bandaranayake lost, Pandu Bandaranayake lost his seat. So 2015, we had the first Sri Lankan legislature without a Bandaranayake. Okay, right. So that was the Legislative Council. So as you can see, it's important for three reasons. Firstly, that's the first legislature in Sri Lanka, and that's the first seed of the parliament we have today. Secondly, it allowed locals to sit, which is a big deal. Then thirdly, it introduced communal representation, which sort of fueled the ethnic tension in Sri Lanka, right? However, despite that, you all need to mention in your answers that this council was highly non-effective because, first of all, the British were an overwhelming majority. The governor appointed all the nominal members, and the governor held the chair himself. And also the governor had the power to pass any decision even without the approval of the Legislative Council. Even if the entire Legislative Council says no, he still can pass the decision, but the condition is then you have to send a letter to the British Crown saying this is why I went against the Legislative Council's opinion. So you can see it didn't pose much of a challenge on the power of the legislative of the government. Right. Thirdly, they created something called the Executive Council. Now, this was a council which had 6 members, which means the governor and 5 British officials. There were no space for locals or unofficials in this house. So what was this? They were basically trying to create like a prototype of a parliament by establishing the Legislative Council. The Executive Council was a prototype of a what? Any of you can guess? Aksa, what do you think? Unmute the mic and give us an answer.
Sorry. Sorry, what was the question again?
Now,
The Executive Council, yes?
yeah, the Legislative Council was a prototype of
The Parliament, yeah.
yeah. So the Executive Council was a
Okay,
prototype.
so a cabinet system? The cabinet?
It's a cabinet. So they want to create something like a cabinet in Sri Lanka because the governor was the solitary executive in Sri Lanka until that time, and they wanted to sort of try out, like give a trial version of a cabinet to Sri Lanka. So the governor wasn't alone. There were 5 other people with him, similar to a cabinet. And the five people included the Colonial Secretary, the Attorney General, the Chief of the Military, and all those people, right? So the British people. It didn't change much either. And another important feature of Colebrook Reforms was allowing English education to locals. Okay, this is how it worked. Now, as you guys know, some of the schools we have in Sri Lanka are like nearly 200 years old. Some of the schools in Sri Lanka were started in like 1802, 1804, and all that. Those schools were started by the Brits, right? Before British people, Sri Lankans had Piriven. Piriven means like the school sort of a place which they ran in temples. So Sri Lankan boys used to go to their temples and study. And I think the Christians and Catholics went to the church and the fathers taught them. And similarly other religions, right? So basically education was done alongside the religion, right? And it was the Brits who came and created schools in Sri Lanka, right? But what for? Why did they create schools? For whom to go to? For whom? For British kids, because we had a lot of British people living in Sri Lanka and their kids needed a school. That's why they created these schools. So up until 1833, only white kids went to these schools. British rulers, like the people in the government, the civil servants, and those European planters I told you about. Local students still went to their temples and their churches and all that and got their education sorted. Now, as you can see now, the entire country of Sri Lanka is conquered by the British people. And now they're establishing legislative councils and all that. And they're establishing all these westernized institutions like departments. They are establishing courts in Sri Lanka, an attorney general's department, an auditor general's department, agricultural departments, all these departments. And you need civil servants to work in these, right? And the British people had the problem. You have to bring every single person who works in these offices from Britain, which was insanely expensive. Now imagine you start a small center for agriculture in Anuradhapura, a district office. Now all the paperwork is done in English, right? Which means we don't have enough English speaking people in the country because only British people can work in those offices, right? So starting from the chairman of that institute till the clerk or even the peon who does all the those minor jobs, right? Minor tasks. All these people had to be brought from Britain, which was extremely expensive. So the Colebrook Cameron Commission was like, you know what? Why don't we teach English to Sri Lankans and recruit them to these jobs? So we don't have to spend so much to bring these people from Britain, right? Isn't that a great idea? So hence they proceeded with that. Then they created all these schools. Then they started Royal College. Then they started St. Thomas and Ladies College, Bishop's College, all these schools that started in 1800s. Then only these schools were started, and those schools that were started before, they started taking local students as well, right? So I told you before that this whole social division we experience today as this whole Posh and Godet thing came as a result of Colebrook Cameron Reforms. And this was the feature that created it in 1833, opening up English education to locals, right? As I told you, their main intention was cutting down the expenses of bringing British people to these jobs, yes, but they had a hidden agenda. They had a hidden agenda. What was that? Now, when you are okay, imagine this. Imagine this. Now I'll ask a question from Ketu. Ketu, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So Ketu, in school, now let's not point fingers at anyone. In school, are you familiar with a type of students called teachers' pets?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, everyone is, right? So what do teachers' pets exactly do?
They give ass to the teacher.
Okay, let's keep the language a little rated. Yeah, what basically they do is they make it easy for the teachers to control the students. Isn't that saying it in a professional way?
Yeah.
Yeah. That means you keep one or two students who favors you, right? Isn't it? So now Ketu, tell me, can the British rulers follow the same method?
Yeah.
How would they do that?
By keeping a local whom they can use as a puppet, if I'm not mistaken.
Exactly. Yeah. Just like in a classroom, a teacher can have like, I can take one of you all and just, favor you and favor that person and give more privileges and all that, and get you to favor me, which means like having an inside man, right? That's what you call in like those spy movies and all, having an inside man. So British people did the same thing, right? So
Sir,
what? Yeah.
sir, so the British people made these schools in order to teach English to people now in Sri Lanka.
Yes.
So, sir, basically, LCIs and royalists go there because to learn English.
Back in 1800s. Keith, I know you have a problem with LCIs. Let's keep at that, okay? We'll deal with it later. Okay, so back then, yes, LC and Royal and all these schools were initially open for white kids, and then British people were like, you know what, we are opening gates for the brown kids as well. Why? So those brown families would favor the British, right? So with this English education, Sri Lanka started having a social class called the English Speaking Society, which we didn't have all this time. We had Sinhalese who were Sinhalese, we had Sri Lankans who were speaking Sinhalese and Tamil. And now that the British people are allowing English education to locals, now there's a small percentage of locals, there's a fraction of the society who speaks English and who gets to hang around with the Brits, which created a social class. And this social class, which you will find in political science notes as the elite class or as the educated middle class, right? They were a middle class in between the Brits and the locals. They started considering them as more superior. Why? Because they speak English. They go to the same schools white kids go to. They go to the same hotels white people go to. They sit in the same table with white people and they use knife and fork to eat the same foods white people eat, right? They drink the same liquor white people drink, not the local liquor and stuff, right? They go to these functions and all that held by the white people. They dress like white people. They don't wear sarongs and those things anymore. They wear like blazers and stuff now, and wear bow ties and all that, right? They work in these departments with white people, right? And they get the privileges from white people. They get to go to other countries and all that. So they start considering them as much more superior than the other people in the country. So this created this difference called Gode and Posh. They started calling Gode Made in a Govio in these farmers who are in Made and all that, they are Gode people. Why? Because they have the Sri Lankan identity. They are not associated with the British. They don't get to go to those schools and they don't behave like the British. And these people are known as posh, higher class, right? That's where it started. You eat Sri Lankan food, you are good. You eat British food, you are posh. You drink Sri Lankan liquor, you are good. You drink British, like the foreign liquor, you are posh. So basically, being familiar and behaving and being associated with the Western culture was considered as a higher social standard by these people in this era, following 1833. After allowing these English education locals and after locals being allowed to their small circle, the British circle, right? And as you can see, in 1833, 187 years ago, right? Up to date, we still have that social division in the country. It has been almost like what 72 years in the British since the British left. We still have that division. We still have that sort of like a social element where when you are associated with the Western culture, you are considered a little superior than the normal locals. If you are associated with the local culture, you are considered a little inferior, right? That's there up to date, right? So as you can see, Colebrook Cameron Reforms were far more effective and far more powerful than you would ever imagine. Okay, right. So that's English education. There was another important thing they did, that was abolishing the government's trade monopoly and abolishing the Rajakari system. Now, before the British people came, Sri Lanka was a monarchy. What is a monarchy? Monarchy and a king, correct? Okay. So Sri Lanka had a king now. Sri Lanka had a monarchy, right? And we had a Rajakari system. And as you guys know, I think all of you all have studied liberalism at this point up to a certain extent. So liberalism is associated with something called capitalism. And in capitalism, the market isn't controlled by anyone. Prices aren't controlled by anyone. It is controlled by... Aksa, what is it controlled by?
Invisible hand, sir.
It is controlled by an invisible hand, as Adam Smith said, right? Which means the prices and stuff are automatically controlled. That's how it works in capitalism. And this is 1833 we are talking about. Europe has already embraced classic liberalism, which means the state wasn't getting involved in any economic activity at this time. And when they saw Sri Lanka having a monarchical system where the king controls everything, including the market and the prices and all that, they were like, you know what? We have to change this. Let's make Great Britain, let's make Sri Lanka also a country like Great Britain. No governmental monopoly, free market, liberal market, right? And today, you have that market that was created by Colebrook Cameron Reforms in 1833. Before 1833, it wasn't like that, right? Before 1833, we mostly, in villages, we mostly had goods exchanging system. People hardly use money. You use money to buy like special stuff like jewelry and all, food and all. This, the people just exchange food. The fisherman, he has a lot of fish, so he gives fish to a farmer, and like he takes some rice. He gives fish to another farmer, takes some vegetable. Goods exchanging system. So what we know today, the money-based system was created by Colebrook Cameron Reforms in 1833, with removing the this governmental trade monopoly. There's no monopoly anymore. No one controls the market anymore. It's a free market. Also, they remove the Rajakari system. Rajakari system means the permanent duty system. Back then, there was something called permanent duty. That means you have a duty to the government which is permanent. That you owe your labor to the king, right? Back then, now you see all these ancient buildings and all we have, right, in Anuradhapura and all. Those things were built by people and not for a salary, because they had a permanent duty, and that was like a normal thing. No one spoke against it, right? Basically, you owe some work to your king. The king has started building a temple or a road or a palace. You're supposed to go there and do your part. That was like a normal thing, right? No one had a problem with that, because people weren't busy like this. And if the government has something called, you owe us some duty. If the government is building a road, you are supposed to come and help. Nowadays we'll have a problem with that, because we are busy. We can't even get our work done, let alone just going help their road, right? But back then people lived a very simple life. They just, they have their cultivations and they have their family. That's it. So people were more than happy to come and help the king. But it goes against the concept of liberalism and capitalism, right? Therefore, what the British people said was, you know what, we are getting rid of the Rajakari system. No permanent duty anymore. You work, you get paid. Just like we do in Europe. Okay? So that's what they did. They removed the government.
Sir, I have a question.
Yeah.
So before, in the period between 1815 and 1833, so it was under the governor's hands, right? So
Yeah.
the market monopoly was also with the governor.
Pretty much. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So those were the most important changes done in the Colebrook Cameron Reforms, and especially the introduction of plantation. Several things come under this. One is the Wasteland Act. They came up with something called Wasteland Act. That means if you can't prove your ownership to a land with a deed, the government takes it away. So they basically said that Sri Lanka has wasted a lot of lands, Sri Lankan farmers, and the government is trying to make them productive, which is not entirely untrue, because Sri Lankan farmers sort of had a myth belief. They believed a myth that said, once you use a land for those hena cultivation, like to cultivate vegetables and all, that cultivation takes up all the goodness in the soil, and you can't take a proper cultivation from that land after that. So they just give up that land and move on to another land slot, right? So there was a problem like that. So there were now Sri Lankan population was quite low back then. It was less than 1 million, right? Currently it's 23 million. Back then it was less than a million, which is even smaller than the population we have in Colombo today, Colombo district. And there was a lot of free land. So in the Candian era especially, a lot of lands were just wasted that way. So British government said that's why they are doing this, to take use of these lands. But their real intention was, to take lands for free. Otherwise, you have to buy lands from Sri Lankans, because they wanted land to start cultivation. But you can't start cultivation without land. You have to pay Sri Lankans to buy the lands, which would have cost them so much money. So they were like, you know what, why don't we take these lands that they have given up, saying that they are wasting those. So they sort of used that excuse that Sri Lankans are wasting land. So they took these lands for free, so they can make the maximum profit through plantation, right? And also that whole removing the, abolishing the, here, don't do that. Guys, by the way, if you all have bubble wrap, right, don't pop those like we used to do back then, huh? Because most of these are prepared in China, and the air inside the bubbles were the air that was in China at one point. Just don't take a risk, you know. Not a joke. I'm just no need to take a risk, no. Who knows there's this?
Oh my gosh.
Who knows there's corona inside these bubbles? I actually saw
I
this
don't.
9-gag meme. I saw this in a 9-gag meme. Like when you're popping like bubble wrap next time, keep in mind that the air inside those bubbles were in China at one point. It was a 9-gag meme, but then I got me thinking that, you know, it actually has a point. So leave it in the dustbin.
Sir,
Yeah.
what exactly do you mean by a free labor market?
Free labor market is that there's no permanent duty. There's you can come and work. Laborers are free. You don't have permanent duty. Get it? You can come and work. You can get into a profession that you like according to your preference, and you can get paid for your work, which is the opposite of an aristocratic system where you are supposed to do the job that comes from your bloodline and you don't get paid and you owe permanent duty to your government. Okay, right. Then are you clear, Aksa?
Yeah, I get it. Thank you.
Okay, right. So basically they removed the governmental trade monopoly and created the liberal market in Sri Lanka, capitalistic market in Sri Lanka. So that supports plantation. Otherwise, European plantations won't come to Sri Lanka if you say, you know what, the government changes everything. Government controls the market. Okay. And another thing that they promoted.
Sir, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah. Yes, Prashit, you have a question? Prashit, you have a question?
No, sir. I got locked. No, sir. I got locked up. So that's it. Yeah.
Right. So, and also they promoted Sri Lanka in European countries as a market. So other people would come. Now, those were foreign investments, right? Foreigners come into Sri Lanka and starting plantation in Sri Lanka. And most important, note this down. As a result of Colebrook Cameron reforms, especially plantation, Sri Lanka's self-sufficient economy transformed into a dependent economy. Sri Lanka's self-sufficient economy transformed into a dependent economy. This is another important feature. Okay, because since the beginning of the Sri Lankan history until 1833, Sri Lanka was a self-sufficient country. What do you mean by self-sufficient? You suffice yourself. You cultivate for consumption, not to sell. Right? You cultivate for consumption. So as a country, Sri Lanka was self-sufficient. Sri Lanka was cultivating its own production for its own consumption. Sri Lankans consumed what they produced themselves, right? Which was changed into a dependent economy. What we have up to date, which means our farmers don't cultivate just for consumption anymore. They cultivate to sell. So you cultivate, you sell that, you buy whatever the other things you want. That's what you call a dependent economy, right? So Sri Lanka started cultivating what we could. Rice, vegetables, tea, coffee, and all that. And we started exporting those to buy other things we need. Understand? Right? So at the sub point to that, therefore Sri Lanka started having an import and export economy. The dependent economy means an import and export economy. You export what you have, you import what you don't have. Okay. The next sub point to that is, therefore, Sri Lanka became a part of the world market. You know, Sri Lanka was an isolated country. We exported certain things like gems and pearls and small things. Other than that, we didn't have like large exports, large imports, right? And we weren't taking part in the world market. But after Colebrook Cameron Reforms, Sri Lanka became a part of the world market. Sri Lanka started exporting. Sri Lanka became one of the leading exporters. One of the leading exporters in the world market. We started providing
Sir,
tea and all
excuse me,
that.
sir.
Yeah.
Sir, a country cannot be fully dependent, no? Any country cannot be fully dependent, no?
Nowadays, yes. Nowadays, any country can't, like because of the system we are used to. Now you can, but you can still argue a country can be fully self-sufficient, but that's on paper. Practically, it's very difficult to do because you need certain things. Otherwise, you have to end up like North Korea, where that you have no ties with anyone else, right? So that's why some people see this as a negative thing, that Sri Lanka's self-sufficient economy's transformation to dependent economy as a negative thing. Some people say, no, because of that, we had to depend on other things. Now you see when the country is in lockdown, Sri Lanka is going through a financial crisis. And there must be a potential food shortage because we can't export anything now, the foods we normally export from, right? So some people say, what if we had the self-sufficient economy since 1833? But some people argue, say that, you know, we had self-sufficient economy while it was possible. And we shifted to dependent economy when it was necessary. Because after the 19th century, being self-sufficient was not possible anymore. Some people argue like that. But anyhow, Sri Lanka became a part of the world market as a result, which was a big plus point. And Sri Lanka was the leading exporter of tea at one point. And during the Second World War, Sri Lanka was the leading exporter of rubber. Right? There was a rubber shortage in the world during the Second World War, and Sri Lanka had a monopoly. Sri Lanka had a monopoly over the rubber export in the world. However, as you guys can imagine, none of that profit came to Sri Lanka. It all went to Yannick. Who do you think it went to? Yannick, unmute the mic and answer. I'd be asking questions to see if you all are sleeping or if you all have put this online and gone. Okay, Prashit, can you send a message to Yannick asking if he is in the class?
Yeah, give me a sec, sir. I'll ask.
Yeah. So I'll ask Nimshi, what do you think? Who took that profit?
Sir, can you repeat the question again?
Now we had a monopoly over rubber export during the Second World War, no? And needless to say, rubber export monopoly, the global monopoly during a World War season would generate an insane amount of profit, but none of that came to Sri Lanka. Who got it? Who took it?
America? I
The
don't
British.
know.
The British took it.
I'm assuming.
The Brits were conquering us.
Ah, I
So
see.
what was the question, sir?
Now, Sri Lanka was the leading rubber exporter during the World War time, no? And needless to say, it
Yeah, okay,
generated
sir.
an insane amount of profit, exporting rubber to the entire world during the World War
Okay,
time.
sir.
And that generated a huge amount of profit, and Sri Lanka didn't get any of that. Everything went to Britain. That was my question. Who took the profit if Sri Lanka didn't get it? Right?
Sir, so basically, Britain, right?
Yeah, Britain, because they were conquering us and they used that money to fight the Second World War. And that was one of the results of Hitler's death, Hitler's defeat. Okay? Right. So, that's about Colebrook Reforms, and we will be moving forward from here. Before that, I need to do a register marking. So when I call the name, just unmute your mic and say present. I just want to see if you all are sleeping or if you all are there. Let's see. Ketu.
I'm here.
Okay. Nimshi.
Yeah.
Aksa.
I'm here, sir.
Milinda. Milinda.
I'm here, sir.
Okay. Devanga.
I'm here, sir.
Rashid is also here. Yannick.
So I messaged him, sir.
Oh yeah, he isn't here clearly. Galina, are you there?
So I think, sir.
Yes, sir.
Galina, are you like following the lesson? I was told that you had trouble focusing on the previous political science class you had online.
Yeah, sir. I'm okay now. I get it.
Did you experience any sleepiness? Was I boring?
No, sir. No.
Okay. Did you follow the lesson? Like, was it clear?
Yeah, it was.
Okay, right. Cool. Okay. So Yannick may come back and join. So we shall proceed. Okay. So 1833, fast forward to 1860s. Now,
Hello, sir.
yeah, proceed.
Sir. I think, sir, Yannick has a connection issue, sir, because in his WhatsApp also the messages haven't gone to him, so only one tick, sir.
Oh, okay. Anyway, this is being recorded. Anyone who's not here, Kamakshi and Yannick, no, those two can get the recording. Right. So, fast forward to 1860s. Now, a few decades went by, and Sri Lankans were, I think it's safe to say that Sri Lankans were happy with the British rule, because except for that one time in 1844, Veerapurangappu and those people attempted like a revolution against the Brits. No one really fought against the British. Like, they were pretty much happy because, like, you know, the last few Sri Lankan kings we had weren't the best, right? So they were sort of happy with the British rule. And 1848, they rebelled because of taxes. There were like heavy taxes imposed on the Sri Lankans, which they didn't like much. So as a result, they retaliated, which was not compared to 1818 revolution. This was like nothing. This was just very minor, and British people just quite comfortably kept that down. So by 1880s, do you guys recall those 3 Europeans I told you about who were sitting in the legislature? Now, I told you there were 6 unofficial members. 3 of them were European planters. There was 1 Sinhalese, 1 Tamil and 1 Burg. Now, as I told you, the locals weren't really aware what this legislative council is. They were like, okay, it's a privilege for us to sit with these guys, so, you know, we'll sit here. And they have no idea what this is. But the European planters, they lived in Europe before moving to this country. So they know what a legislature is. They know how a parliament works, which means they know the power a parliament should have. So as I told you before, you're going? So, as they have seen in their countries, their mother countries, that a parliament should be much more powerful than this. As I told you before, the Colebrook legislature was not very powerful. Here, do you want to draw something? Shall I give you some papers? Do you want to draw something? Shall I give you some papers? Check there. Yeah, paper in that file. Okay. So, as I told you, this council was quite ineffective, not very powerful at all, right? And our local representatives were not educated enough to realize that. But the Europeans knew it. Europeans were like 9 officials versus 6 unofficials. That's an overwhelming majority. And the unofficials were appointed by the governor himself. Governor can remove anyone whenever he wants. So he controls them anyway, right? And the governor chairs himself this place, and the governor can pass any act without the approval of any of us. So what's the point in having a legislature like this? Europeans knew that. So by 1860s, Europeans started protesting in front of governor's office and governor's quarters and all that, holding those boards and all that, saying, we need more power, we need more representation, we need more seats. They started this campaign of protests in the 1800s. They started writing letters to the British throne saying, we need more seats here, there's not enough seats, and please make a majority of unofficials, make this legislature more powerful and all that. Which went on for a few decades, and the British people didn't really care. No important changes happened to the Legislative Council, except for in 1886, they added 2 more unofficials, one for upcountry Sinhalese, one for Muslims, right? As you can see, they are just making that communal division even worse now. Anyhow, no reasonable changes made, right? So by 1890s, now we have the younger generation of that, British-friendly social class I told you about, right? These British-friendly people are called as Kalusuddu. Why you call them Kalusuddu? Because their skin is dark, their skin is brown, right? Their appearance, their physical look is Sri Lankan, but everything else is British. They dress British, they eat British, drink British, behave British, talk British, work with the British, hang around with the British, go to British schools and all that, right? So other than the physical appearance, other than the skin tone, everything else is British. So you call them Kalusuttu. Roughly translates, anyone who don't understand, roughly translates into black whites, right? So the younger generation of these people, they had an extra privilege. What is that? They got the opportunity to go to European countries for their higher studies, which is an important fact. Note that down. The younger generation of the elite class went to European universities, Oxford, Cambridge, these universities, and got degrees, got the education and came back. Now, unlike the previous generation, these guys know what a legislature is. They've been to Britain, they've been to the British Parliament, they've seen it, they've studied it. What you guys study as political science today, that generation, that was the first generation who had that education. What parliamentary democracy, what are elections and all that, what are cabinets. These people saw them with their own eyes, and they turn back to Sri Lanka and be like, what the hell we have been having all this time in our country? 15 members council with governor chairing and governor appointing all of them. What on earth is that? Let's have a proper parliament. And they started protesting against the British, saying, no, we need a proper parliament like in Britain. We need a proper cabinet and a prime minister and all that, right? Just, we don't need this stupid, ridiculous looking legislative council. Remove that. So, as you can see, the European planters who started those protests in 1860s, they sort of like just faded away from the scene, from the spotlight, and the locals took over by 1890, the same set of protests for more political reforms, which was the movement that continued until 1947. So, keep this in mind. Sri Lanka never had an independence movement. We were a British colony and we did not fight for independence. Okay? What our people fought for was for political reforms. Okay? You have countries like India, people like Mahatma Gandhi, Nehru, and those people who were Ketu, did you send me a text or? Okay,
Sir, she's saying that her connection is lost. So, like, she sent me a text as well and told me to tell you that she can't join back.
oh, okay, right. Shall I try adding her again? Okay, right. So, as I was saying, now, Sri Lanka's these so-called national heroes didn't fight for freedom, right? Independent. Now, in India, we had people like Mahatma Gandhi, Jawaharlal Nehru, who were peacefully asking the British to leave and give them their independence. And there were people like Bhagat Singh and all who were violently trying to chase the British away. We didn't have either. We didn't have national leaders fighting for independence in Sri Lanka, right? We basically had these elite class people writing letters to British rulers saying, give us more seats and make a parliament and, give us more powers, right? So as you can see, Sri Lanka's national movement was started by European planters in 1860, which was taken forward by the local leaders. Also, our local leaders did not ask for independence, which is embarrassing and humiliating as a nation, right? We, after being a colony, after being a European colony for 500 years in terms of coastal area, and being a full colony, the entire country being a colony since 1815, right? Still, we didn't have a national movement. We didn't have anyone fighting for independence. So, since it was so embarrassing and humiliating to say that we are a post colony, that we used to be a colony and we didn't have people fighting for independence, our history books named these guys who wrote letters to these people as national heroes. So these D.S. Senanayake, Sir James Peace, S.W.R.D. Bandaranayake, E.W. Adhikaram, these people, they are basically leaders who appeared for more political rights, right? So these people started protesting political. Now, in their defense, they said we would have been better off with the British, right? In their defense, what they said was Sri Lanka would do bad as an independent country, so we would rather be a British colony. We would do better, which cannot be denied either, I would say. We would have done better if we were a British colony, right? So, anyhow, these people started protesting in 1890s, asking for more political reforms. So as a result, after 77 years of Colebrook, we finally got our first break in 1910, right? Devanga, can you tell me what reforms were given to us in 1910?
Sir Crew McCallum?
Crew McCallum reforms. We were given Crew McCallum reforms in 1910, right? So these Crew McCallum reforms didn't change much. As I told you, it was the Colebrook Cameron reform that turned the country upside down in 90%. I would say Colebrook Cameron reforms change about 3%, about that, minor changes. The main thing they did was they expanded the number of the legislature, which was earlier 15. Now they expanded it to 21, which had 11 officials and 10 non-officials. Out of the 10 non-officials, 6 of them were nominated by the governor. 4 of them were elected with limited franchise. which is the most important feature in this reform. Limited franchise. That means people were allowed to vote for the first time, but not everyone. The right to vote, more like the eligibility to vote, was dependent on 4 things. What were the 4 things? Milinda, can you name the 4 things, 4 eligibilities to vote in 1910?
You had to be an educated, and you had to own land,
Mm-hmm.
an amount of land.
Yes, that's 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you need to have passed senior college.
Yeah. So basically, it was limited with 4 eligibility criteria: education, wealth, gender, and age. Right? So basically, you have to be someone who's capable of speaking, reading, and writing English, and you have to pass the senior college exam. That's education criteria. You have to have more than 4,000 rupees worth of property. Now, understand, this was 110 years ago. 4,000 rupees meant around 4 million back then. Right? 4,000 rupees worth of property. And you have to be an adult male above the age of 21. Okay. So, based on this criteria, the entire country had about 2% of voters. Around 2% of the country were only allowed to vote, right? So note this down. You can include this in your answer. Under Colonial reforms, or basically the concept of limited franchise, under that, voting is not a right. Then what is it? Voting is a privilege. Okay? Voting is not a right everyone has. It's a privilege only a chosen minority of the people have. Okay? Right. So, there were 4 people elected to the legislature with limited franchise. 2 of them were Europeans, 1 burgher, and 1 educated Ceylonese. There were 6 nominated members. Out of the 6 nominated members, 2 of them were low country Sinhalese, 1 upcountry Sinhalese, 2 Tamils, and 1 Muslim. I hope you noted that down. Okay. Now, another important thing is that, now think of the British perspective here. You continued for 77 years under Colebrook Reforms without changing anything. Now, for the first time, locals were effective enough to protest that the British rulers would actually change something about the government. Now, if you think as a British, would you consider this to be a red flag? Would you consider this to be a red flag? Why is it a red flag? For the first time, locals are effective enough to, get what they wanted. So British rulers were like, you know what? We'll give them something, but we'll make sure that their division is even more worse now. So why not take divide and rule, communal representation to the maximum level? If you look at the Crew-McCallum content, right? You have 6 nominated members. Look at how they have broken that down. 2 low country Sinhalese, 1 upcountry Sinhalese, 2 Tamils, and 1 Muslim. So you can see at once they have divided Sinhala, Tamil, Muslim. That's number 1. Then even the Sinhalese also you divided, saying 2 low country Sinhalese, 1 upcountry Sinhalese, low country, upcountry, right? Also, it wasn't mentioned in the official document, but in practicality, they chose the 2 low country Sinhalese from 2 different castes. You basically chose a Govigama Sinhalese and a Karava Sinhalese. Govigama Sinhalese are the people with those typical Sinhalese surnames: Karunaratna, Paranavithana, Surya Bandara, Gunawardhana, Gunasingha, Abhevardhana, and all that. Karava means the ones who get all those European surnames, Silva, Pires, Fernando, De Silva, Alvis, and all those people, right? So that's a Karava Govigama difference. You chose the Pahatarada Sinhalese from one from Govigama, one from Karava. And the Tamils also. You chose one
Sir,
yeah. Yes, Pradeep.
so Karava means fishery, right?
Yeah, coastal areas, no. Not everyone is related to fishery. That's the foundation. Those are the ones who were mixed with the Dutch and Portuguese. That's why you have those surnames, European surnames. Okay. So the two Tamils also, they chose one Vellala Hindu Tamil and one Tamil Christian. Okay. So you can see that they have extended the racial division up to the caste division now. You see the level of disunity they were creating among the locals. Also, keep this in mind, when you choose one educated Ceylonese, what does that mean? Nimshi, what does that mean when you choose one educated Ceylonese?
That guy is watching, that guy is good.
That other guys are uneducated. Now imagine that I create some sort of a council and I take all of you all and I'll be like, okay, let's choose a representative for educated students or smart students. And I chose one of you all and be like, okay, you represent the smart students. That means others are not smart. Others are dumb. Right? That's sort of what they did. The British people gave one seat for educated Ceylonese so that other people would be considered uneducated, that there will be a difference between educated and uneducated Ceylonese. So you see the level of division. Okay. And there's an interesting story. Aksa, are you here?
So I'm here. Yeah, I know what you're going to talk about.
Yeah. So can I have like a 2 minutes break while you explain this first educated Sinhalese, Tamil Sinhala story to others?
Okay. So just correct me if I get it wrong.
Yeah,
okay.
sure.
So according to my knowledge, what happened was that there was supposed to be one Tamil person, so there was Ponnambalam Ramanathan versus Marcus Fernando, who was so basically what happened is Ponnambalam Ramanathan got the seat, and the other guy didn't. So it was sort of like the caste division was given more prominence than the division between the races.
Yeah.
So am I right?
Yeah, that's right. Basically, the two people who ran for that seat for the educated Ceylonese was Sir Marcus Fernando and Ponnambalam Ramanathan. So Sir Marcus Fernando was a Sinhalese, right? So that very first seat that was elected by locals was won by a Tamil. Tamils were like less than 10% of the country at that time, right? So Sri Lanka being an overwhelmingly Sinhalese majority country, how did a Tamil manage to win the seat? At first sight, it looks as if, wow, Sri Lanka is such a non-racist country. Like Sinhalese have voted for a Tamil without, just like, it reminds you of Obama winning the presidency in America. But when you actually dig deep and to see the story, it turned out to be that the Govigama Sinhalese didn't want to vote for Marcus Fernando because he was a Fernando. He was a Karava person. They said he's not like a pure Govigama Sinhalese. So they were like, you know what, rather voting for a Karava caste person, we'd vote for the Tamil person. So Ponnambalam Ramanathan got the votes of the Tamils as well as Govigama Sinhalese, whereas only Karava Sinhalese voted for Marcus Fernando. Right? So Ponnambalam Ramanathan got the seat. Right? So as you can see how messed up and how divided our society was at that point as a result of British people's tactics and strategies, right? So as a result, in 1915, something important happened. in 1915 in Sri Lanka, the Sinhala Muslim conflict took place. The first notable ethnic conflict in Sri Lanka, right? Sinhala Muslim conflict. What basically happened there was, this was in Gampola, right? In Gampola, that there's this temple that goes, that they attend a Perahara every year in this Gampola temple. So this year, a Muslim mosque was built next, like right by the side of the road. So these there were Muslims praying inside the mosque, and the Sinhalese people were going the Perahara as usual, as they do every year. Whereas they were like, Sinhalese Peraharas, they have this like Pera and all those Nala and all those things, right? So this is musical. And the Muslim people have sort of like come out and told them like, can you keep the noise a little down? We are praying inside, which sort of like, then some Sinhalese got flipped saying that we've been doing this Perahara every year and now you're there to start a mosque here and come and tell us to, keep the noise down, and which has led them into a conflict. And as you know, what this is something we are familiar now. Sinhalese people going and breaking the Muslim houses and Muslim people coming and breaking the Sinhala houses and shops and all that. So that was the first ethnic conflict. First of many, I must add, right? In 1915, right? And you can see the effect of Colonial reforms and the communal division, communal representation the British people had. 5 years later, we had the first ethnic conflict in Sri Lanka. Okay. So another important thing happened after this. Now, back then, okay. I give you a question now. If anyone answers this question right, the person will win a Kit Kat the next time I'm coming to do classes. Can anyone name the British governor we had when this Sinhala Muslim conflict took place? You have 30 seconds, otherwise you'll Google and say it. No one for the Kit Kat?
Sir, can't hear properly. So can you repeat the question, sir?
Who was the governor?
Sir, can't hear properly.
I feel like you're stalling till you Google the answer.
Sir, can't hear the question, sir.
Okay. Who was the British governor Sri Lanka had when the 1915 Muslim Sinhala conflict took place?
Donamore?
No, before that. It's okay.
Sir, what was the question? Sir, what was the question? Hold on. What was the question?
The only way you can find the answer is there's a Wikipedia page of British governors in Ceylon. You have to go and see who was there in 1950. Never mind, it was Robert Chalmers. Okay? It was a guy called Robert Chalmers. There was a problem with this Robert Chalmers fellow. Okay? It turns out to be this fellow was quite insecure about his powers. And he was always worried that a rebel, like a revolution, something like that would break out. Right? He was so worried that, like someone who would shoot at his own shadow, someone like that. Right? So this guy sees Sinhalese and Muslims are, going at each other, like, just pounding each other. Right? Then he thinks to himself, what if this is a conspiracy? What if these Sinhala guys and Muslim guys are pretending to, fight each other and, take weapons and all that, pretending to attack each other and suddenly turn against the British? And this turns into a rebel or a revolution. So he takes steps to arrest everyone. Every leader, Sinhalese leader. So they arrest those elite class leaders themselves, like D.S. Ranayaka, Robert Chalmers, Henry Pedris, and all those people. They arrest all these people, saying that they conspired against the British rule. Right? So these people were imprisoned. Not only that, one of them was killed. One of them was executed. So Henry Pedris, he was executed. Right? If you guys know that there's a basketball court in
Yeah, near Police Park.
Police Park basketball court, I think that's his name. I think, if I'm not mistaken, that land was owned by him. That's why it's called his name. So Henry Spadris, he's people, we consider him to be a hero because he was a part of this elite class, and he was accidentally, mistakenly killed by the British. Okay. So this sort of led our elite leaders, educated middle class, these black white people, they were having a conversation inside prison. They were like, you know what, we've been just going behind the British and favoring British all this time, yet these guys put us in jail, right? So if we need to prevent this in the future, what do we have to do? We need more power. So they continue to protest after coming out of jail, saying, we need more power. We need a parliament. We need a parliament, with a cabinet and all, like in Britain, right? Make it dominion, like half independent. But we are not asking you guys to leave, okay, Brits? We want to make this clear. We are not asking you all to leave. Stay here. We'd love if you guys stay, but give us the controlling power. You guys stay in charge. Just put us in control, right? You guys stay in charge. You're the conquerors. Just give us the responsibility and the power, right? Make a parliament, right? Put one of our cabinets, put one of us as the prime minister. I stay in charge, right? Which is what you call a dominion state, which was eventually given to Sri Lanka in 1947. So these guys were asking it in 1917, right? So in 1917, they formed an organization called the Ceylon Reforms League. Write that down. They formed the Ceylon Reforms League. Now, with the name, of course, you guys understand these guys, they don't give a crap about independence. Where do you find the word independence in that name? Ceylon Reforms League. They are there to take reforms. That was their purpose. They were fighting to get reforms, right? So anyhow, they were like, dear Brits, we need reforms. We need a more powerful government system, right? But the British were having a little bit of trouble at that time because these were 1970s and this was the World War times, right? Britain was fighting the First World War in Europe. So they were like, well, just hold up, okay? I mean, like, we are fighting a world war here. We can't look into, this colonies, political reforms right now. Once the war is over, we'll give you something. And they said, you know what, for now, temporarily, we'll give you Manning Reforms, 1920 Manning Reforms. This is until we give you the proper one, okay? Just keep this for now. And they gave us 1920 Manning Reforms, which also didn't change much other than expanding the number of the legislature, right? So the number went up to 37, including 21 unofficials and 16 officials, 16 British officials and 21 non-officials. Now you can see something important has happened. What's the important thing that has happened? For the first time, the majority is unofficials. Okay. But there's a catch. Out of the 21 unofficials, 7 of them were nominated by the governor, just like before.
You given me 23 unofficials and in the note I have.
Sorry?
In the note you've given me, it says 23 unofficials and 14 officials.
14 of you. Hold on. Let me double check that. Anyway, numbers aren't that important, like I have given in the note for further clarifications. Yeah, sorry, 21 official, sorry, 21 unofficial, 14. No. 23 unofficials and 14 unofficials. Yeah, sorry. So there were 14 unofficials, no, 14 officials and 23 unofficials. So for the first time, you have 23 unofficials going against 14 Brits, right? But the problem is, out of the 23, 7 of them were nominated by the governor himself. Only 16 of them were elected, right? Which means 7 of them are controlled by the governor directly. You are appointed by the governor. That means you can be removed by the governor, which means you are under the control of the governor. So governor has 14 officials in his favor, plus 7 unofficials under his control. So governor still has 21 people in his favor. Anyone confused about that? Any of y'all are confused about that? No? All clear? Right. Are you clear with that? Right. Okay. So basically, for the first time in 1920 Manning Reforms, we received a majority of unofficials, yes, but still governor had the upper hand because out of the 23 unofficials, 7 of them were still nominated by the governor. Okay, right. Now, something important happened when under this. Okay, so as I told you, 16 of them were elected. No? So out of that, 11 of them were elected regionally for provinces. 5 of them were elected communally, as I told you before, right? They wanted to keep the communal representation going. So they took 5 people elected on communal representation basis. They introduced regional representation as well to take 11 people in, but they didn't remove the communal representation. So now there's a seat for each province. Northern province 1, southern province 1, like that. For 9 provinces, there's a seat for each. Plus, there are 2 more seats additional for Western province, specifically for Colombo, right? So 9 seats for 9 provinces, 1 for each, and you have 2 extra seats for Western province. Now, there was a little bit of a problem, okay? Because who was the Tamil people's leader at this time? Tamil people had two frontline leaders back then. Ponnambalam brothers, Ponnambalam Ramanathan and Ponnambalam Arunachalam. Now these 2 couldn't come to the parliament. Why? Parliament, no, legislative council. They couldn't come to the legislative council. Why? Because now they would have to contest from the northern province seat, right? Because that's where the Tamil votes are. Ponnambalam brothers can't win in any other province in Sri Lanka. They have to contest in Jaffna, right? Northern province. But the rules, the eligibility rules said that if you are contesting for a provincial seat, you have to be a resident of that area. Now, Ponnambalam brothers don't live in Jaffna. They live in Colombo. So there's a problem. And after that, what happened, Aksa? I have told you before.
Yeah, so they were part of the Ceylon National Congress, so which contained Sinhalese Tamils and leftists, and the Tamils separated and formed the Tamil People's Movement.
Why? What happened over that seat? Do you remember me teaching you that?
Yeah, so sorry, sir. They weren't able to get it from the northern province, so because of communal representation. And yeah, so because of that, they lost the seat, and they were not okay with it.
Do you remember something about someone not keeping a word to the Tamils? Do you recall me teaching something like that? Them asking the Sinhalese leaders, Okay, basically this is what happened. Now they couldn't contest in Jaffna, right? Because they don't live there. They live in Colombo. Now, as I told you before, the Western Province has 3 seats now. Other than the seat they get, they have 2 additional seats, right? So Ponnambalam brothers came to meet the Sinhalese leaders in the Ceylon National Congress and said, "Hey DS, Machan, we have a problem, right? Now we can't contest in Northern Province in Jaffna because we are not residents there, right? We have to contest here. But Western Province has a majority of Sinhalese, right? So we can't contest with you guys and win, obviously, right? So can you do us a favor, Machan, and not contest for 2 seats in Western Province, right? You know, you Sinhalese guys don't have a problem. No, you all have seats everywhere. You all have like seats in Southern Province, like the Central Province, North Central, Northwestern, Sabaragamu, Uwa. You basically have the Sinhalese coming from everywhere. So no problem, right? So why don't you take, when it comes to these 3 Western Province seats, why don't you take 1? You all contest for 1 and leave 2 seats for us. Don't contest for those. So, you know, me and my brother can come to the Legislative Council. And our Sinhala leaders were like, yeah, sure thing, bro. Of course. And high five and fist pumps and all that. And the day of the election, they gave nomination for all 3 seats. Right? Do you remember me teaching you that, Aksa? Did I mention that to you? Or?
Yeah, you did. I think I haven't written down. So when I was revising, I suppose
It's not important for the note, but it's better to know the background story so you'll have a better understanding, right? So Sinhalese leaders didn't keep their word. They said they will leave these 2 seats out. We won't contest for these 2 seats because then you guys will lose and you guys won't be able to come. So we are leaving those 2. We are giving you our word. And the day of the election, they gave nomination for all 3 seats. As a result, Ponnambalam brothers lost the election, and Ponnambalam brothers, the 2 main leaders of the Tamil people, were not in the Legislative Council, which led the Tamil people and the Ponnambalam brothers to break away from the Ceylon National Congress and form the whole Ceylon Tamil Congress. Right? So since then, Sri Lankan national movement was broken into pieces. So as again you can see, it's the divide and conquer theory that ruined Sri Lanka. Now you can see how the ethnic tension is getting worse little by little. Now you can see how the civil war took place several decades later, what was leading up to it, right? You guys need to remember this situation, this story, especially not only for this lesson, right? For the political party system of Sri Lanka as well, and also for the ethnic conflict of Sri Lanka, right? Okay. Then in 1924, for the first time, in 1924, we were given Manning Devonshire Reforms. This was the first reform that we were supposed to get in the first place. Now, we were given that temporary reform because of the World War. Now, this was the actual one we were supposed to get. This actually made some important changes. Okay. It's like this. For the first time, as we wanted all the time, the majority became the elected members. This was consisted of 49 members. The number expanded up to 49. And out of that, 12 of them were British officials, 37 of them were unofficials, right? Out of the 37, only 8 of them were nominated by the governor, 29 of them were elected with limited franchise, right? By this time, the voters also had expanded up to like 8% of the country. And we had 29 elected members, which means 29 members who were not under the control of the governor, right? Therefore, we call it, for the first time, we had a majority of elected members and a majority of members who were not controlled by the governor. 1924 Manning Devonshire Reforms created a government which separated power and responsibility. Power and responsibility. Why would you say that? Now, who has the power? Who has the majority in the legislature? Locals. Who is responsible about Sri Lanka to the Queen? The governor. Right? So, our people might, they have the power and they might do something silly, the governor will have to answer to the queen. Get it? So therefore you consider that as a separation between power and responsibility. So for the first time in history, by the late years of Manning Devonshire Reforms, the governor requested the British government to send a new reform. Right? All this time it was the locals who were like asking for reforms. So now for the first time, the governor requested for reforms. So as a result of that, by 1931, we received Donamo reforms. Okay. So we'll basically have we are going to discuss what do you call Donamo reforms tomorrow in the class and the remaining bit. So we will be just clarifying whatever the area that you guys weren't clear with up to this point. Okay. What are the questions you guys have? Any clarifications? If you all don't have questions, then I'll be asking questions. If you all are not asking questions, that means you all are full clear. No? That means you all should be able to answer my questions. Show me your painting. Guys, take a minute to appreciate my brother's artwork. You think it's cool? Can you all say, someone say it's cool?
Did he draw that now, sir?
Yeah, he wanted to listen to the lesson and after a while he got bored, so he started drawing.
Wait, show it, sir.
See.
Can't see. Oh, that's so cool.
Wow.
I see. Right. Open it. Okay.
Oh,
This guy here is a little Josephian. He's in grade 4. And he is the bassist for our band. Okay. So, questions? This is the Q&A session followed by the lesson. So, no questions I see. So, I would be asking questions from you all.
I actually have a question.
Yeah.
Sir, so in 1924, when we had the Manning Devonshire Reforms, that
Mhm.
was post World War I, yes?
Yes.
So you said that they didn't have enough money to sort of give Sri Lanka a proper reform because they were dealing with like the post-war situation. So is that the reason why they had the Donamo reforms, or was it merely on the request of the governor?
No, it's like this. Now, we started asking for reforms in like 1917 when they were in the middle of the First World War. Okay. So they were like, we are a little too busy at the time. So why don't you all keep Manning reforms for now? In 1920, Manning reforms for now. We shall give you a new reform later. Right? So after that in 1924, they gave us Manning Devonshire reforms. That's what happened there. Okay. So rather than the money, what they had was like the attention. They didn't have the space to give attention to Sri Lanka because they were fighting a world war. So that's why we were given Manning Devonshire reforms in 1920 as a temporary solution. And 1924 Manning Devonshire reforms were the proper solution. Right? And we were given Donamo reforms for several reasons. Number one is that our people continued protesting because they still didn't get like a proper government and a cabinet and all that. Right? They wanted like a much more wider system. That's number one. Then next thing was they wanted who this British governor himself started protesting, saying because it is separation between power and this thing, no separation between power and responsibility. So he wanted this thing without like disconnecting power and responsibility. He wanted like a proper governance. Also, after the First World War, the British Empire sort of started following a system to let go of their colonies. Understand? Right? They sort of started giving away colonies. They were like, we need to give independence to these countries little by little. And you can't give independence straight away, no? You can't conquer a country for 150 years and be like, okay, you know what, guys, from tomorrow onwards, we are going, you all are on your own. You can't do that. You have to do that little by little. So, Donoughmore Reforms was like a trial version of a government that was given to locals to train locals to handle independence. So they had the idea of giving independence to Sri Lanka by like late 1940s, and Donoughmore Reforms was like a first step to do that. Okay? Understood?
Yes, sir. Sir, universal franchise wasn't really a request by Sri Lankans. Yes.
Yeah, I'll be discussing that tomorrow when we are discussing the universal franchise, Donoughmore Reforms. I left Donoughmore Reforms for the next day because we had to discuss that a little wider than that. That's how the lesson, like 50% is earlier reforms, other 50% is the Donoughmore Reforms. That's how the lesson goes. Okay, so I'll name a person and ask a question. I'll go easy on you all. So basically, I'll give you true or false. This is not a type of a question you all get for A levels. But yeah, let's go easy. First question. Ketu, unmute your mic, please. Yeah. Ketu, question for you is, 1833 1833 Colebrook Cameron Reforms established a legislative council and an executive council with local membership. True or false?
False.
Why is it false?
Oh no. Because I don't.
Was that like Manash or you just said false?
Wait, sir. Have mercy on me. Wait, sir. Legislative council.
Colebrook Reforms
Hello?
establish a legislative council and an executive council with local membership. Okay, anyone else wants to say why is it false? Galina, what do you think? Have you fallen asleep?
No, sir. Sir, if you don't mind, can you repeat it? Because the connection is a bit.
Okay. 1833 Colebrook Cameron Reforms established a legislative and executive councils with local membership. True or false?
True?
No, it's false. Why is it false?
Sir, can you repeat the question, sir?
1833 Colebrook Cameron Reforms established a legislative and executive councils with local membership. True or false?
Sir, it's false because it wasn't for local membership, sir. Because they only gave it for selected parties, sir.
It is false.
Isn't it true?
Local membership was only allowed in the legislative council, not in the executive council. Remember, executive council only had 5 British people and the governor. Local.
Sir, give me 5 minutes, sir. I'll be back.
Yeah, sure. Right. Next question, Devanga.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. The protests for more political responsibilities were started
Right.
by local elite class leaders. True or false?
Sorry, wait, can you go back so again?
Protests for more political rights were initiated by elite class local leaders in Sri Lanka. True or false?
Oh no, I'm confused now because they did start protests, but that was oh no. um I'm just gonna go with true, but yeah, is that right?
No, it's false. It's not them who started the protests.
Was it the European? I'm confused. I don't know.
My brother can answer. Can you loudly say the answer?
European planters.
It was the
Yes, okay.
planters who started protests in 1860s.
Yeah, so
Taken
actually
more
I
by
have a
locals.
question on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, when did they start? Also, who are these people?
1860, they started in, as I told you, in 1860s, these people said that we don't have enough seats in the legislature, we need more seats, we need more power in the legislative council. And as I told you, these guys are Europeans, they lived in Europe, so they knew what legislative councils are capable of. They had seen parliaments and all. Since our local people didn't know that, no, so they were like, okay, it's a legislative council, we get to sit, it's a privilege, blah blah blah, and all that. They didn't know what these things were capable of. They weren't even educated enough to comprehend, to appreciate that this is powerless. And the Europeans knew that. So European planters are the ones who started the protest in 1860s, saying, you know, give us more power, more seats, more political rights. That's why I told you Sri Lanka's national movement was not started by Sri Lankans. It was started by European planters. It's even more humiliating. Right? That was taken in 1890s by local
90s, right? Okay.
The 1890s.
Yeah.
The younger generation, because they had a European education. They went to Europe to study, then they saw parliament.
Yeah.
Understood? Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Sir,
Yeah, Ketu.
sir, can I ask you a question?
Go ahead. This is Q&A. You can.
Sir, how do you spell Robert Jarvis or whatever?
Robert Chalmers.
1915.
I am certain you know how to spell Robert because of Robert Pattinson. So you spell Robert like that. And you spell Chalmers as
No, that's the surname.
Charmers.
CH.
Yeah, Chalmers. Okay. Robert Chalmers. Okay. Right. Next question.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Mili.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. The statement is the Legislative Council was chaired by the British governor from 1833 to 1931. True or false?
The British governor stopped chairing from Manning Devonshire. He stepped down.
So who took over the chair?
The chairman, who was appointed by
an internally appointed chairman. Okay.
Yes.
Right. Nimshi.
Yeah, sir.
Okay. Question for you is 1910 limited franchise allowed all educated and wealthy adults to vote.
Yeah. Are you asking me? Okay.
What do you think I was doing?
Not
limited franchise allowed all educated and wealthy adults to vote.
Yes, true.
It's false. Munivara,
True,
can you tell why?
For?
They had to
No, males.
No, educated, wealthy adults kiwama, like it comes. I'm missing one eligibility there. All educated, wealthy adults weren't allowed to vote. Only educated, wealthy adult males were allowed to vote. Got it?
Yeah. Okay.
Women weren't allowed to vote anywhere in the world at that time. And when we studied feminism, we saw that one British lady who was from a big family and all, she jumped in front of a horse and killed herself in the protest that women are not allowed to vote in 1915. Remember? Emily Davison. Right. Right. Next question, Aksa.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So the question for you is, the legislative council that was established, in 1833 did not go through any change until 1910.
So they did sort of expand the number of members and stuff like that. So initially, like they had 15 members, and then it was 21. So I'm assuming that's false.
Now I'm asking in between. 1910 wala it became 1920, like it became 21, 15 to 21. I'm asking in between. Nothing was done. Is it true or false? I'm asking questions on these small things you will miss in this lesson.
Yeah, I know. So I think they added 2 people extra to further the communal representation.
There you go. In 1866,
Okay.
1886, what were the 2 communities?
Was it Muslims and something?
Upcountry Sinhalese.
Yeah.
Okay. Keith, are you here? Can I ask you a question? Keith, your camera and your mic both are off.
Hello?
Yeah, Keith.
Yes.
Yeah. So the question for you is, can you name 5 things changed by the wait, you weren't there in the first half of the lesson, no?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
But shape, I'll try.
Okay.
I'll try.
So can you name 5 things, 5 suggestions and 5 things changed by the Colebrook Commission in 1833?
Give me a second, sir.
That's where we started.
Sir, what's the question, sir?
5 suggestions made by the Colebrook Commission. So in an easier way, 5 things done by the Colebrook Commission. I think I told you like 8, 10. Just to tell you all, when I was doing A-levels, I studied 16 suggestions.
So, like, basically divide and conquer those things or what? I'm not sure.
No, first thing is restricting the unnecessary powers of the governor. Then, Nimshi, can you tell 5?
So can you repeat the question again?
5 suggestions by the Colebrook Commission. Basically 5 things done by the Colebrook Commission.
They established the legislative and executive councils.
Yes.
they uh, wait, hold on.
You remember something about schools?
Restricted the powers, unreasonable. Yeah, and they allowed locals to go to, I guess,
They allowed
British
English
school.
education to locals. Galina, can you mention 6 suggestions?
Yes, sir. Curtailing the powers of the governor and establish the Legislative Council and the Executive Council, unitary administrative system, and abolishing the trade monopoly of the government, and abolishing the Rajakari system, and introducing a new judicial system. Does it count?
Yeah, that also counts. Yeah, that's something I didn't mention before. I didn't go into all the Colebrook reforms before, so I'll just mention it briefly now. If you all want to take down notes, I only took the most important ones. Other than that, Colebrook reforms also took steps to create a unified administration system. That means by this time, Sri Lanka had 2 administrations, one in upcountry, one in lower country. You guys know that they captured the two levels at 2 different times. No, they captured lower country in 1796. Then they captured upcountry in 1850. So by the time they captured upcountry, they already had their rule established in the low country for like nearly 19 years, right? So because of that, they already had the governor running things in the lower country, and up country they put some other agent. The governor put an agent to govern up country area. So by the time the Colebrook Commission came, there were 2 administration levels going. One is done by the governor in the lower country, and in the up country there was an agent of the governor. Colebrook Commission said this is like an unnecessary expense that having 2 different administrations. Let's put them together and they unify. That's one. Then the judiciary. Judiciary also they changed. As I told you, C.H. Cameron was specifically brought to change the judicial system. Judicial system has so many different things made. Differences were made to judicial system. Not all of them are important to us. Most importantly, there was a separate judicial system for upcountry and separate system for lower country. Then they unified that. Other than that, they had a special court proceeding for foreigners and another court proceeding for locals, and they unified that and they brought all the court proceedings to foreigners and locals both. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Also, if any of you all are planning to follow a career in law in the future, this might be important to know. Even if you are not following law as a profession, this is good to know as an interesting fact and general knowledge. Sri Lanka's legal system is known as the civil law. Civil, like what do you call that? It's a common law, right? So this is because our court system was initially created by the Dutch. They came here and they established courthouses and all that, and they were following Roman Dutch law in Sri Lanka, in lower country, not in up country, in lower country, right? So when the British people came, they wanted to change the entire legal system. They want to take Roman Dutch law completely, like take that off and introduce English law. But the thing was, judges were Dutch at that time. They only knew Roman Dutch law, and they were hesitant to follow English law. They said, if you all bring English law, we are going back to Netherlands. So then the British people would have to bring judges and lawyers and everyone from Britain. So they were like, okay, you know what? You guys can keep Roman Dutch law. We'll continue with Roman Dutch law. But if there are loopholes in the Roman Dutch law, you have to use English law to cover that. So basically what we have is like the general law in Sri Lanka is a combination of Roman Dutch law and English law, which is like 95% Roman Dutch law, and the loopholes were covered by English law, right? However, in certain areas, they completely repeated everything and introduced English law, such as the criminal law. Criminal law, what we have is 100% English law, right? So this was also done following the Colebrook Cameron Reforms, for anyone who's interested. Okay, right. So before we conclude, any other questions? Can all of you all unmute mics? Yeah. So do you guys have any questions? Any of you all fully clear?
Pretty clear.
Okay. So if you all study and if you come across any question, just WhatsApp me the questions you all have. Also, are you guys satisfied with the lesson?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, Galina, what about you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So tomorrow at 2 we will continue this, and we will discuss the Donomo reforms and we will conclude the lesson. Okay.
Sir, tomorrow, sir, we have school, sir.
Tomorrow is a holiday.
Yeah, sir. Tomorrow, sir, we have through Teams, sir, our political science put a class for us, sir.
What time?
He called me in the morning. He said that he'll text me, but he said it will be from around 1 o'clock to 5 o'clock with breaks, because he hasn't even done one class for us, sir.
Right. If that's the case, we'll move it to Saturday.
But
You guys are okay with Saturday?
sir, if anything changes, sir, I'll let you know, sir.
Yeah,
Saturday,
can
what
you-
time?
Yeah, 2 to 5. Now there's a fixed class. Now if the Josephians are not available, we won't be able to do it. So if they are not having the school class, then we can have it. Okay. If they're having it, we'll shift it to Saturday. Are you
Sir,
guys
I'll
okay with
tell
Saturday?
you. He said that. Sir, our sir said that he'll tell us by tonight.
Mhm.
So I'll text her as soon as he gives me the words, sir.
Yeah. Can you put in the group so everyone gets a notification?
Sure, sir. I'll do that, sir.
Yeah. In case if it's not happening tomorrow, are you guys okay with Saturday?
I have a class, sir.
Okay. Saturday, what time?
I think 2 to 4.
Okay. Now you guys, Josephians, let me know, will you, if you all are not available? Then we'll try to decide a time on the WhatsApp group. Huh? Yes. Okay. Right. Nice having the class with you all. I'll see you all soon. Huh? Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Okay. Study hard.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.